I am really, really excited to be kicking off our April programming with this panel discussion about building and maintaining a strong brand. So April is all about brand management, and there's so many different facets that go into brand management. As we kind of mentioned in some of our emails, yeah, there's a logo, yeah, there's social media, there's so many things I think when we think of marketing that immediately come to mind. But kind of a term that we're going to use today is that's marketing stuff. And really, at the end of the day, it's key to focusing on strategy, getting to know yourself, and build and maintain a strong, true brand. So this panel is going to be key and perfect for this, depending whether you are just getting started, building your own brand, or if you have an established one and you want to kind of tighten things up a little bit. This is going to be a great panel for you. So I'm excited to welcome our panelists. First off, Ashley Dodge, do a quick introduction.
Hello, my name is Ashley Dodge. I am a marketing and growth strategist here in Denver, and I'm a member at Rise.
We're so pleased to have you here. Thanks, Ashley. Eriko.
Hi, everybody. I see a few faces I recognize this morning. My name is Eriko Pope, and I was in corporate executive marketing for over 20 years. The last 15 was at Nestle Purina as the global head of marketing, and I recently left in 2019 to start my own firm focused on entrepreneurs and nonprofits. And I'm excited to be here with you today.
Thank you, Eriko. And last but not least, Molly.
Hello, everybody. I'm Molly. I'm out of the Denver Rise office, and I focus mostly on insights and strategy as it relates to brands and innovation. I spent 10 years at an agency, and I spent another 5 or so at Celestial Seasonings, and I've also started some of my own products. So I kind of have both sides of the spectrum from a brand and strategy perspective.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. And what I love too about just looking at all the faces that we've got here joining us today is you guys are all coming from a diverse background of stages. Some work for big brands and you're a part of a bigger brand. Others represent your own. And as I said, various different stages. So I think this is going to be a really valuable and exciting conversation. Thank you for making time in your busy Monday morning to be with us. One thing I will let you know, as with all Zoom conversations, if you need to run early, not a big deal. You don't need to apologize for it. You don't need to let us know. We know life happens. Also too, for future presentations, the beautiful thing about Zoom is no one's going to notice if you walk in late either. So never hesitate to let timing stop you from coming to an event. So feel free, log on late if you ever need to, log off early if life is happening, business is happening. Good news is we are recording this. So there's going to be a lot of great notes and information that I know you may want to come back and listen to later as well. And so this will be available on Rise TV for you to come back and listen to, share with others as well. So we also have a chat box down at the very bottom. At this point in pandemic life, I think most of us are pretty Zoom savvy, which is nice. But if you have not, the chat function is at the very bottom. That's a great way for you to get involved, ask questions. I will save some time at the end for us to do some Q&A and for people to kind of raise their hands, ask. But if you have questions as we go along, don't hesitate, drop those in. I will stop and we'll ask them as we go as well when it makes sense. So feel free to use chat as much or as little as you would like. We're also going to share some files and information in there too. One way to get started too, as we're all kicking things off, if you want to enter into the chat something that you're really hoping to hear about, or if there's anything in particular, you're like, oh my gosh, I really hope that they touch on X. This is a burning topic. When it comes to brand management and establishing your brand, feel free to enter into the chat just a couple of words, 1 or 2 words, just to let us know, because that also helps us and our panelists know what you really want to hear more about, so we could dig more into that if we want to. The cool thing about panels is these are conversations. So it's not quite so prescriptive. So feel free to jump onto chat and let us know what you're dying to hear about, or what is a pain point, things like that in your brand strategy. But we'll go ahead and kick things off. So as I mentioned, as tempting as it is when it comes to marketing and branding, to dive right into that marketing stuff like social media, doing your logo, writing blogs, all the stuff that yes, at the end of the day, we all need to be doing to promote and market ourselves. It's really fundamental, as this panel and I discussed earlier in planning, to start with the foundation. So whether it's for a newer company or one that needs to kind of tighten things up, Eriko, I want to start with you. What are the building blocks of developing a brand strategy?
Well, and I saw a little question pop up in the chat too about where do you start as a startup? And interesting from my perspective, you start in the same place as any brand, actually. If you're a big brand or if you're a little brand or you're a startup, the building blocks are fundamental. And every single one of my clients, and many of them are startups, that's really where we start, because it really understanding that baseline of yourself. And so to me, the 5 building blocks that you really have to know thyself about in order to position yourself well is, one is your consumer target. Who are you positioning your services and products towards? And really not just the demographics of it, but the psychographics of it, the needs, the wants, the motivations. That emotional benefit that you're serving is incredibly important. The second building block is what I call brand equities. Oh yeah, here's my slide. I use this all the time. The brand equities, these are really the components, your special sauce. These are your tangible points of difference. So it's important for brands, I think, to understand what are the points of parity, what are the points that you're going to compete on to be able to be competitive in your space, but then what are those points of difference? And that combination of points of difference creates your key equities. This is what your distinctive positioning in the marketplace. The third is your persona. What kind of brand do you want to be? Are you a fun, lighthearted brand? Are you a mentor, serious brand? Are you a wise brand with insights? It's very different. And depending upon every category, I ran a dog food business in the US that had 12 different personas. That's the way we're able to differentiate in the marketplace and for you as well. The fourth one is, how are you going to run your brand? What are the how, those values? And last is, and probably the most important, is, why are you doing this to begin with? What's that underlying purpose? If you didn't exist in the world, what would be lost? And those combination of things to me are the brand foundations. And without it, it's really hard to be smart and efficient with your marketing communications when you don't quite know thyself very well. So that's my building blocks perspective.
Well, and I think that I am glad that you had provided me with that 5 different things. And what we'll do, just so you guys all know, we'll have a file of that and make that slide available to you. Because I think that's really key, as you said, is just knowing what starting at the beginning and then building from there. I especially love, and actually this is a little, if people want to go on Rise TV, about a year ago, Eriko did a great presentation about brand personas. And so that's one that I know we have a great resource on Rise TV about too, from Eriko, and really getting into that brand persona, because I think that's key. Is like, what's your personality? If you were to meet your brand walking down the street or at a coffee shop, what are they like? How do they dress? How do they act? That helps then inform, what kind of words does this person use? Are they, as you said, a mentor? Are they the ones that are the educator and they use really sophisticated, polished words? Or is it super conversational? Because I think we've all interacted with different brands where they're doing everything short of cursing at you. And some even do, being like, oh, there's really big levels of that personality. And so that's one of my favorite of the 5 that you did, but each of them is so key and fundamental. And I think it's smart because that informs the quote unquote marketing stuff that we will all do from there. Ashley, what are your thoughts when it comes to
another thought I would just throw out?
Oh no, go ahead, Eriko. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, it is messy. So you might have parts of the 5 already. I would just encourage you to keep revisiting it and refining it. And as you gain more experiences, you'll actually be more able to articulate it. But it is like, let yourself play with the Play-Doh and not get overwhelmed by it. It is a creative exercise. And you keep revisiting it. I'll just say for myself personally, since I've launched my own firm, this is what I've done for 20 plus years. And I'm still playing with my own Play-Doh of Katalyst STL and making sure I'm like refining it. I keep realizing, oh, there's this new discovery, and that's this angle. And so now my persona is a bit more sharp, or the brand offering is much more distinctive. And so you just keep refining it until you get to that magic point. So if you're at a point where you think you struggle with it, that's normal. Everybody does, but it's just that you're constantly refining it. So the concept of playing with the Play-Doh is something I wanted to share.
Oh my gosh.
I love that because like you said, it is kind of messy. I think that in addition to that, I just usually tell people that you have to have an overarching idea of what your vision is and how that informs all of those 5 building blocks that Eriko was just sharing, because I think that sometimes people can get stuck in like, oh, I need a persona and then I need this, and then it becomes like a task list. And Eriko, when she's sharing this in like a robust environment, this is kind of like your understanding of what your brand is completely, but it should be driven by, I think vision is another thing that is like really important, of like visualizing what in 5 years that actually looks like. And so that's usually what I start with. And when I'm helping people explore kind of those initial stages, a lot of businesses that have been have been around for like 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, I'm still shocked at how they are going through that messy Play-Doh experience as well. And so from an outsider's perspective, until like they address me as a client, I don't know that. I'm like, oh, this is great. But then they have these, doubts and questions. And so everyone's going through it. So I appreciate that Eriko is honest about that process, because I'm doing the same thing. And it's a lot easier for me to say from the outsider perspective, oh, well, if this is what you want to accomplish, this is how you do it. But I think that it's always just a great start to use the resources that you have to do that brand exploration, and make sure that at the core of it is your vision for what you want your company or, enterprise to be.
Well, I think what that really makes me think about is, it's like, I mean, we've seen whether things in the news that we need to adapt to, customer service issues, pandemics, things like that, that we can't predict, as I think tempting as it is to be formulaic. And it's like, okay, we've established this strategy. This is who Ernest's identity. And we have to just be super, life gets in the way. As I said, news, business things, we have to be adaptable and play with that Play-Doh. But what I like and what I think is really key is by having that core and have done the work to really identify those things, you can still veer a little bit, but it's staying, you've established a lane that you're able to stay with it. So it's not saying that you have to be completely prescriptive, but and you can keep playing with the Play-Doh a little bit, is what I feel like I'm hearing you as saying, but that at your core, who and what the brand is and the values and what's important to them. Something I want to touch on and get Molly involved. So what's really cool about Molly's experience is she has been on both sides of this. So as you guys heard in her intro, her background is in marketing strategy, being on the marketing, the agency side and all of that, helping brands establish and do this hard work of the foundation. But now she is an entrepreneur and she's co-founded her own company and is now having to live out the work herself and has been on both sides. So Molly, I'd love for you to share, because I think a lot of people are more on your current side now who are a part of it. Kind of talk about the importance of that and how, both perspectives. Give us your thoughts on this topic.
Sure. Yeah, I think what we've been talking about so far is spot on. You got to be nimble. You've got to know, I think most importantly, what your strengths are, and find others who can play around your strengths. And basically, don't do, accounting. So I need to find somebody who can understand my business and any accounting needs. Do I need to hire an accountant? Not necessarily, but I need to find somebody I can talk to about that type of topic. Likewise, branding and strategy might not be your thing. You might be really good at coming up with great product ideas and really inventive in that way, but you need somebody to help you bring it to life and to actually make it marketable. So surround yourselves with those people. So I think there's a few resources that I've really used or think are helpful. If you're in the food space, Colorado Food Works in the Denver area, Naturally Boulder is now expanded beyond just Boulder. It's all about natural products and natural companies. So that one's not just limited to food, even though it's a food heritage. The Small Business Development Center, I think, is really an underutilized group of folks that can totally help you, and they're free, and they can connect you also with some of these great people. So I think the biggest thing, at least for me, was finding people to help bring a vision to life. And for me, I didn't know much about manufacturing. So I had to go and find somebody who knew about it, because you can spend so much time down a rabbit hole of internet searching. But to be honest, it's faster just to try to network your way around it and say, do you know anybody who makes products here? Or, LinkedIn, of course, is a good resource, but trying to get out there and talk to people to understand how they're making something or bringing life is helpful. And there are so many more entrepreneurs out there and small consultants that can help at a fraction of a firm price, but they have firm or big CPG experience to help. So I think from my perspective, that's kind of the biggest thing. And then get into, the cycle of creating a product, creating a brand, and all of those things. But, I think there's a lot of spinning of wheels that goes on before that even happens.
Yeah. What that made me think of when you were mentioning that as well is, every company uses a lot of different vendors and outside partners for various different things. And they're extensions of your brand, too. I mean, like making sure that you're finding someone who is in line with your values and what
Absolutely
your brand as well.
Yes. And I think that's important, is finding those mentors and resources that can just be an avenue to talk to.
Yeah. I mean, having incredible resources, as I mentioned too, it's like there's the big, as you had touched on, there's the big firms and people that you can engage with. And but a byproduct, a positive silver lining of COVID has been the accessibility of, as you said, mentors and agencies, people who have gone off on their own and more accessible than ever. And it can be a little bit easier. And as you said, sometimes even more affordable to find people kind of share your brand alignment and can help support you in your area so that you can focus on what you do the best, or help you really work through this brand strategy and foundational work. I think is very cool and a great opportunity. So I want to touch back on some of the mistakes that you guys have seen some brands making. I don't know, Eriko or Ashley, does anything come to mind for you, or kind of some of the mistakes that you see brands making over and over again? And it's like, oh shoot, I wish that they would have gotten some support around that. Eriko.
Well, I would say oftentimes I'll get approached by clients who are, and I'll say clients, friends, whomever, who might be, let's say, working on a tactic and it's sort of not going their way. It's a website that doesn't look right. It's a communication that's not really playing out as they had hoped. It's something that's going awry. So it tends to be, and so it kind of goes back to my foundations point earlier, but the biggest mistake I see is when people want to go play with the fun stuff before they know what they're trying to say, and what their positioning is. And so I'll even say my own personal example. I don't even have a website yet, because even though this is my core expertise, I'm still trying to nail exactly how I'm going to position this organization I'm starting up. And so I didn't want to waste my dollars on building out a website that I'm just going to go revamp, 6 months later. So just something to be thinking about. I think having that strategic choice up front, being clear, it's not all cases where, sometimes you have to parallel path these things, and that's totally fine too. But the biggest mistakes I see are people investing in significant dollars in execution when they're not exactly clear what their point of difference, for instance, is.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's hard because, as you said, even mentioning a website, it's like, gosh, there's so many different websites that are like, oh, you can make a website overnight. Come to Square. I love Squarespace. Ours is built, but they advertise on every podcast I listen to saying, oh, make your free website. It's going to look gorgeous overnight. Launch it. And it's like, oh, well, okay, well, I'll start with that because I'm not a real brand until I have a website, right? But that kind of blows my, and it's like, oh, it's so easy. Kind of blows my mind to hear that you, Eriko, don't even have a website for your own self. And I think kind of really plays into that. It's like, oh, or demonstrates that point that you were just making. Molly, talk to me about some of the mistakes that you've seen brands make.
Yeah, I think trying to be all things to all people is a big mistake. And you assume that your product is applicable to anybody. And it's really easy to chase shiny objects, to, chase the penny over here instead of building a relationship with your consumers. And I think the more you build those relationships with your core consumer before you start fanning out to other people is really important. And it's so easy because you're going to get bored with your own business, your own messaging, your own products before consumers do. And they may have seen a message twice, you've seen it 700 times.
So I think it's, you know, trying to just stay focused and to really not get is probably one of the biggest.
Okay, cool. Hey, just as a note, I'm not sure if it's just me. You're starting to break up a little bit for me. So I don't, just at the heads up, Molly, in case there's in between now and the next question, just as a heads up. But no, what was real, I love that, like trying to be all things to all people, especially think about you like in a Bloody Mary company. It's like, who doesn't want a Bloody Mary? But it's like, you could really segment down into that and think about what sets your product apart, what makes you different and things. And that's important. And something I think that I've heard each of the three of you talk about in planning for this is being comfortable with, because one of the things, and I'll touch on this as a great segue into it, is really knowing who and defining your target. You know, we heard that a lot. It's like, you really need to define your target market. You need to niche down into who your audience is, but how and why that is so important. So how to define, how do I choose my products is needed by so many different people. As I said, Bloody Marys, obviously it's needed by all of us. Now more than ever, but you know, Eriko's experience in dog food, and there's so many different backgrounds. Actually, you know, you've got wide experience in insurance, for example. We all need these products. So how do we really niche down and make them and pull on some of that strategy work, the foundation that we've talked about? Ashley, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it comes down to understanding why we even care about branding, right? Because it really is signaling to the world how you do your business, right? It's who you are, but it's like, why do I care about that? It is really risk mitigation. If you think about it, going back to insurance, is it's saying, I know this person, they're a sure bet, and I'm going to make a purchase or engage with them because I know who they are. And so it makes you a known entity. And so if you think about it in terms of that, you don't have to drill down, like Eriko said about, you know, having a website or anything like that. You really do need to think about what your business is and how you do your business. So I think that when you're looking at targeting your markets in different ways, it doesn't have, you like Molly said, you don't have to be everything to everyone, but you do need to know why you're signaling the things that you're signaling, whether it's just on social media or the website. And so if you don't get clear on that, then it does make things really hard for the people that you're trying to connect with, right? So I think a great example is when, going back to your past question as well, is a coffee shop that is in Aspen as well as here in Denver. They made a billboard or like a sandwich board sign that said gentrifying neighborhoods since, and then put their established date for their coffee shop. And that was so offensive. They were connecting to people that had been in up and coming neighborhoods, but they were using the word gentrification as a positive thing. And there was a huge backlash. And so if you don't know who you're, knowing your target audience is one thing, but you also have to understand the bigger, broader ecosystem of the people you're trying to reach, because you're not going to be able to say, here's my message, this is my target audience, and I'm only directing it to them. They are part of a bigger, beautiful world that is going to be looking at your brand as well. So yeah, I would say that understanding your target audience is one of those things and getting clear on those questions. But you also have to realize that everyone is seeing what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, gosh, haven't we seen a million times where maybe someone's speaking exactly the right words that their audience might have thought it was incredibly funny or pithy or whatever. But as you said, that larger ecosystem, it's backfired big time on them. And that's kind of a scary thing. I mean, I can acknowledge this is kind of a scarier environment at times to learn to navigate as a brand. Eriko, as I mentioned, you know, you work with the dog food. Your background was in international dog food brand with Nestle Purina. Talk about choices. My cat is wildly obese and overweight, and trying to just navigating which cat food to feed her there's so many choices. So, you know, it seems the system is like, just get her food, but it's not that simple. And again, whether we're talking about Bloody Marys, we're talking about insurance, there's a lot that goes into that selection. So how do you not overwhelm your audience, depending if you've got multiple different products and services, doing that differentiation and connecting to the right targets? I'd love your insights because I know you've got great experience in that.
Well, maybe just to build then too off of Ashley's point and weaving the two together. So brands to me are shortcuts for, you know, your constituents, your consumers. You know, they could pick right, if you went to PetSmart, you could pick 200 brands. You have a choice of 200 different brand offerings, not SKU offerings. There's probably 10,000 SKUs you could pick up and walk out the door with, right? And so the question is, how do you make choice? And so when brands are able to be strong and connect to their consumer base, they make it really easy for people to make choices. And the world is full of unlimited choice, right? Even now I could go on Amazon and buy, you'd think, oh, a pen, how many pens could there possibly be? Okay, there's just bazillions of pins, but I'm going to pick, Ultra Point Micro 270 because I have a connection with that brand and an experience. So brands are really a connection point. And Molly knows in her, consumption world, there's so many choices to drink, right? So why are we going to pick Molly's company over the many choices that we have? So brands to me are really shortcuts, and why it's so important for us all to create those relationship and connections. When it comes to multiple brands, if any of you are dealing with multiple brands within your portfolio, you might have launched with one and then you start creating, a different range of set of brands. That's where, again, being really clear about, what those distinctive brand offerings are about and making sure that they are not cannibalizing one another. So it's easy if I said, well, I have dog food, I have a dog food brand and a cat food brand. By definition, the consumption target is going to be differentiating. But if I have 12 dog food brands, which is what I had, national dog food brands, roughly speaking, and then globally I had 20 dog food brands that were all over the world in different markets, how do you create distinction? Well, it is about, this is where marketing magic comes in. It is about consumer segmentation. First and foremost, who are we going after? Am I going after the dog parent who is really into the science behind the food, are very influenced by the vet, want to follow a medical regimen? Or am I talking to a parent who, I just want my dog to have fun and I want it to be healthy, but I really want it to be fun. And so it's a very different experience. It's a totally different branded experience, although the underlying nutrition is good across all these different offerings. So yes, I think that's where, the point around differentiation and understanding your consumer comes into play, because otherwise you just cannibalize yourself. You launch one thing and the second thing cannibalizes the first thing that you launch. So it's a good example of why this discussion today is so important.
Yeah, real quick to build on that, Eriko, because you brought up the point earlier about targeting with psychographics. And I think that's where you start to get in, it's not just demographics about who these people are, how much they make, where do they live, suburb, urban, blah, blah, blah. It's what keeps them together psychographically. What values do these people share about their pet in this example? What are those values that they share? Price point is obviously going to play a role in this, but they're buying that brand because they think that brand is going to bring something to their pet. It's doing something for them, whether it is, to your point, about ingredients or fun. And the way that the messaging plays out, if you go back and look at all those brands, is different. And they're coming at it from a different way, but they're trying to come at it always from an emotional perspective and that psychographics.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, Ashley, please go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I have a rescue pet that he came with like bougie dog food that was from Petco. That I grew up on a farm, and I was like, should we just transfer to like Puppy Chow or something? And the vet was like, no, you need to stick with the brand that he came with, so that you don't have any digestion issues. And 2 years later, he was diagnosed with heart failure and had to pay $10,000 for his vet bills because of bad branding, right? They branded it as, if you love your pet, you'll spend an extra $50 on dog food, which ended up being even more devastating for him. And so you really have to realize that like brands really do matter, and you have to kind of see through that and judge it out, because it had devastating consequences, and I'm still dealing with the impact of it. My puppy is fine now, but it's hard. I mean, he's going to be on lifelong medication all the time. And it's because I bought into the myths and those psychographics that people prey upon, right? And so you want to make sure that long term, what you're doing has staying power, right? Because all of those fads, they broke free, and now the FDA is, constantly listing those bad brands as offensive, businesses. So you have to really think about when you are messaging, what, like, if you can actually back up those kind of things. And that's why those branding exercises really do have business consequences. They have impact on people's lives. And so I think that we really have to think about it in terms of like, are we backing up what we're saying we're doing?
Yeah,
Well,
integrity is what I'm hearing you say too, like how important for sure that is. You know, something that I can even speak to in our business, you know, when I hear you talking about personas and psychographics and demographics of our person, you know, who your ideal customer is, it's really hard sometimes though to say, especially if you're in a startup situation or you are in a business where maybe someone, your product could be needed or wanted by lots and lots of different people, and you want to sell as many products, services, memberships to as many people as you think that you do. How do you go about saying, no, this person isn't for me? Or why is that so valuable? Ashley, do you have some
Dance, which I think is so important.
Oh, sorry. So sorry. I missed that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It sounded like Molly or Eriko had something first. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Go for it, Ashley.
Oh, yeah. So I think that that's something that I've learned a lot about is just like, there's certain things that are just like, people are not for you, you know? And I think that when you're searching out who you want to work with, I think Rise is a great example where you have a vetting process, right? And so you aren't just like, here, buy a membership and drop it, right? You have a very carefully curated community. And I think if you signal that out and you create that as part of your business processes, then whenever people do see what you are, they go on the website, they are understanding of the whole, like where they would like, is this something that I want to identify with, right? So it's not necessarily kind of like what Molly said about, you don't have to be everyone to everyone, everything to everyone. You also want to make sure that you're creating certain systems and processes so that when people come to you, they know if they're a right fit as well as if you're a right fit, right? And so I think it's more of a dialogue rather than just constantly putting stuff out there and signaling.
Maybe just to build on that too, I would say instead of thinking about it as you're leaving others out, you're creating a great gift for those who you do engage with. It's creating the best experience, the most fabulous experience for those who really want it the most, who psychographically fit, you know, the offering. And so that's how I think about it. You're creating the best gift that you could possibly create, this best, most delightful experience, so that, you know, people join Rise and they come to a virtual event like this, it connects with them, there's value to it, and they want to come back. And then the next time they may want to contribute. And so it's this cycle that you're creating through Rise. But I think without choices, it's very dilutive. I call those, you know, those tend to be commodity type brands. And you don't want to be a commodity brand. You want to be a very distinguished brand in the space that you want to make a difference in.
I think that's a really great point. I love that. And yeah, and hopefully the Rise analogy, that's not to be self-serving, but as members and you guys experiencing that, hopefully that can resonate for your brand as well. Something I want, so we've talked a little, I feel like kind of focus on like the establishing it from the beginning. So for companies though that have been around and have a strong brand, how do, or an established brand, how do you continue to evolve and stay fresh and maintain consumer interest when, as I think it was Eriko or maybe Molly who had said, you're going to get sick of your own brand. You're going to, you hear it 700 times. The consumer might just be a brand new exposure for you, but how do you keep things fresh, both for yourself, and for your consumer while maintaining that foundational, the key foundation that we talked about a long time ago?
I can give my 2 cents. I think it'd be interesting to hear Molly because she's sort of in the mix of it right now. I would say there's 3 things that I always look at to try and stay fresh. One is obviously the consumer. So they're not static. These are real human beings and they have points of view, and a lot of that's changing, particularly the last 12 months. I would say it's been the most dynamic for all of us, we can attest to, but that means your audience base has gone through a lot. And it's a very different world than it was even 12 months ago. And so your messaging needs to be empathetic and relevant, and listening to your consumers and engaging with them can drive innovation. So that's one group. The second group I always look at as my competition. because everyone's moving fast. And, you know, my always suggestion is pick a couple either mentors that you feel like these people really do it right. And maybe pick a couple people who are like, this is like competition in my space. And you're just watching and you're seeing how they're pivoting and they're responding. And that can be informative. And then the third, these are sort of my 3 C's. The third C is I look at climate and context. And so that's what Ashley was talking about. You know, you've got these macro trends that are happening. You can't be tone deaf to what's happening in sort of the context of the world pandemic, for instance. So we're not going to have, you know, non-virtual events right in the middle of a pandemic as an example. But those things, if you kind of keep pulses on them, make you move. It's very dynamic. They're all 3 moving. And so you've got to find how do I stay relevant is by making sure that you are on top of how those different dynamics are impacting the space in which you compete.
That's great advice. I love that.
Totally.
Yeah. Molly, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is kind of space with engaging with consumers frequently. And it can be formal or informal. It can be a short Google survey or something really simple, but just staying in touch with them to understand what's going right with your brand and products, what's not going so right. So being open to that feedback. But I also think when you're talking about a strong brand, Nike honestly is a great example that started as a marathon brand, you know, a running brand. It was very focused and their target was very intense, if you will. And then as they saw the fitness craze start to evolve and develop, they identified, oh, this is another target, but how do we enter that market in a way we can do it? And I think their slogan of just do it is such a great great slogan because it can be applied across multiple targets and still be relevant in wherever they are in their journey. So I think it's, you know, understanding how to grow, but grow while using what your strengths are.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and I think we just started to lose you again. I'm sorry, Molly. Kind of the breaking up, the blessing and curse of technology that we can stay connected. But I loved hearing that, you know, the importance of receiving feedback and being open to that, and so that way you can evolve to them. And as a consumer, I love knowing that a brand is listening, you know, and adapting, because then they value my opinion and they want to hear how the experience is going. And also, as I've heard from so many, the easiest sell that you can get is a referral from somebody else, you know, as opposed to starting with a brand new customer who's never even heard of you. You know, the referral system and, you know, people telling their friends, we all have that friend who's like, oh, where should I go eat tonight? They're like, oh, go eat at XYZ restaurant. It's like, oh, done. I'm not even going to do research. And so thinking about how we can nurture and keep those brands close or keep those customers close. Part of that is I hear that helps us then evolve for future customers and current ones, and the importance of giving and receiving that feedback, I think, is huge. You know, we mentioned competition. Are there ways to measure competition? Like, are there sources or ways that we can actually, I mean, and there's the anecdotal and things like that as well, but like to really understand and kind of measure competition and how we're comparing to others and use it in a useful way. And I also love that we only pick 2 or 3, as opposed to, of course, you can compare yourself to everyone. But you would have any thoughts on ways to actually go about doing that, measuring to the competition?
Well, I mean, if you're with a large organization, it sounds like we're more with smaller organizations on this call, but if you're with a large organization, I mean, there's limitless data, especially if you sell through, you know, anything with a register. So that can be bought, right? So there's Nielsen, there's IRI, there's large companies that every commercial data, every scan that you make, someone's securing that data and repurposing and reselling it. So that it does exist. But I think for smaller organizations, some of the things I always suggest is get in the industry magazines, you know, sign up for those. So every industry has their industry groups, 3 or 4 different groups that are really specific to the industry. And I always find that they do a nice job of curating content that's relevant for your discipline. So whether you're in writing, there's many. If you're in manufacturing, for sure, wine and Spectator. I mean, there's so many different industry rags. Some are sort of the high end and some are the more grassroots. And I would just suggest finding those because That's a great way to get intelligence for your space, and it's pretty low cost. And then I always suggest with my clients, it's really pick the one or two brands. You know, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but pick a couple of brands that that are mentor brands that do have a presence on the internet. It's not hard to see them and to track them. And that kind of provides inspiration. Now, it doesn't necessarily tell you dollars and cents unless they're publicly available. But I feel like that's enough sometimes just to get started.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback.
Google Trends also does a really good job. You can see what people are Googling just by searching Google Trends, which is really helpful.
Ooh, I love that. And is that a free resource?
Yeah, you can just type in Google Trends and then it will show you certain things, but it'll also, because you don't necessarily know what other kind of trends are aligned with that, it will actually just start pre-populating it for you. So it'll say, if I searched women's co-working spaces in Denver, Rise would be at the top of the list, obviously, but then it would list a couple other companies that didn't quite make it during the pandemic. Sorry, but it's a great example of being able to see comparable brands. And even if I wasn't into co-working space and I say that I actually want to do like an online curated community, I would be able to look to something like that, right? And so if you are doing brand research, there's like infinite possibilities on Google just to see what people are doing.
That's really cool. So yeah, I'm just looking
Google
at
Trends.
Google Trends.
And hashtags.
I'm seeing some of our, attendees. So like public speaking skills, St. Louis, or HR and recruiting. And so you can put in some of those keywords and like your location, or maybe if location doesn't even matter as much anymore.
It'll segment it. It'll segment it by location as well as you can see globally. So, and you can also do a time segmentation of like the last 5 years or the last year and really drill down on those metrics, as well as I would also recommend just checking out hashtags and seeing where the conversation actually is going, because that again reinforms how they feel seen, right? If you are engaging in the conversations where those clients actually are, they're going to see you as part of a bigger player in those conversations. Everyone calls it thought leadership. I think that I think that thought leadership can bleed into kind of like self-marketing in like a tricky way too. And so I think that more generally, just authentic conversations always serve you.
Very cool. Before we go to Q&A, we've had a couple of questions that come in that I would love to get your all's thoughts and feelings on. So one of the questions was about brochures, print or digital. Are they outdated? I mean, this is getting into a tactic piece, but thoughts on investing the time and energy into developing print or digital brochures?
Okay, tell me if I'm breaking up. But I think it depends on your audience. Am I breaking up?
Losing you again. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Now we can, yes.
Oh no, is that better?
Yes, let's go for it. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so I think it depends on the industry, because in healthcare, for example, brochures are still very relevant. So I think it depends on what you're using for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the woman who asked, actually, she works in like wealth management and kind of in the finance sector, for example. And yeah, I can see, like when you're in a healthcare environment, I'm at my doctor's office, I pull out a brochure as a takeaway, or even here at Rise, if someone walks in for a tour, having a takeaway. So we have invested in having those print products, but actually did make them virtual as well for follow-ups. But sometimes, it's like those take an extraordinary amount of time and energy. Actually, Eriko, do you guys have any quick thoughts on maybe even for her particular, for wealth management, or thoughts on that tactic?
Well, I think the exercise of a brochure is that it forces you to figure out what the heck you're going to say on a really small little piece of paper. So it is sort of cull it down into something really distinctive. And so I think the exercise is really awesome. And then the question just becomes, how many of those do you actually print? I mean, those can be pretty low cost. So I actually feel like it's a low cost, as long as it's an effective tool. I think in wealth management, it is a more touchy-feely kind of very personal relationship experience. And so, it does professionalize it, I think, by having something tangible to hand to somebody. And it's a low cost execution. So I think it's a reasonable tactic to utilize. But I do think the exercise for everybody, if you were forced to write your story on a brochure, what are you going to say when you don't have unlimited pages on a website to go on and on and on about yourself? And it does force you to kind of get to the heart of the matter. So I like the idea for sure, for everyone, but then tactically, to Molly's point, just depends on the industry you're in.
Yeah, super cool. And Ashley has since put in the chat some really great resources, which we'll make available. She put in the trends.google.com link, but then also on Canva. We use Canva all the time, which is a super helpful resource and can make marketing much more in reach and free and available. One other question that I wanted to touch on, if someone is going to walk in and have a meeting with a brand specialist, what information should they come armed with if they're going to decide to, either with a consultant or an agency, they're consulting a brand strategist or brand specialist, what they should come to the table prepared with to make that a productive first meeting and decide if someone's a good fit for them too.
You want to pick someone who has that drive that you have, that is like, okay, let's do it. And you want to make sure that they're listening to what your goals are, but you also want to pick someone who you see as an actual partner or an equal, because if you're like, oh, just do it, going back to what Molly said about Nike, brand management is not just do it. This is not a set it and forget it, hand it over to someone else. You have to be an active participant. And the larger your company is, the more important it is for even the CFO to be able to get into an elevator with someone and explain not only their role, but also what the company does as a whole, right? And making sure that they're explaining mission, goals, and values. And so whoever you engage with when you are ready to start working on brand management, make sure that they are someone who believes in what you do and really wants to help you, because I think there's a lot of people out there that prey on. I'm working with a client right now who had a marketing firm pitch him a $20,000 website, even though we already had a website, and he just really needed to update some photos and really make sure that he was putting out the message that he wanted to put out, right? But like you said, if you have 15 different million pages on your website, then people aren't really able to get clear on who you are. But when you're picking someone that is helping you with marketing, brand positioning, guidelines, those kind of things to keep you on track, make sure that it's someone who you see as a partner and is really bought into what you're doing, because there are going to be times when you are exhausted and you're like, oh, is this the right color? Are we doing the right communication style or the right cadence? And there's a lot of really minutia details that you're going to get exhausted by. So make sure that it's someone who is excited about it and can lift you up during those difficult times.
I think that is so key for so many different vendors and partners and things too that you might engage with. I think that's super key. Molly, Eriko, did you have any thoughts on what information, if someone were to head into their first meeting, consult? Molly, yeah.
I think you just go in and just kind of go in with your passion. This is my product. This is what it is. This is why I created it. And you just kind of, I'm sort of the fan of just vomit the information to that strategist, that partner, and say, what do we do? You're being honest. You're being a little bit vulnerable and saying, I don't know where to go with this, but this is why I created, why I did what I did. And, and look for them to have that passion, as was mentioned. And if they're either going to have it or they're not. And if they don't, then they're not the right partner for you. But if they can see and feel your passion and understand where you're going with it,
that's a great fit. Yeah, great partner. Oh, I'm losing you, my friend. Oh, I'm so glad we got all the up until the end part.
They can take that information and help you mold it to what it needs to be.
And then it goes right back into our Play-Doh analogy with molding it. I love it.
That's right. I was just going to say, I think that's what a brand strategist does. This is sort of like what we do, is we help guide folks who do have passion and energy, and they know, they just need help articulating it. So, but I think the question I find goes a little bit back to the mistakes. Most common mistakes is when you're approaching a brand strategist, that's a very specific type of of all the range of marketing support out in the universe, that's a very specific type. So the question becomes, what is the problem you are trying to solve? What are you reaching out for help on? If you have a great foundation on everything and you're having a hard time communicating your message out, that's a different type of person and resource I would go to. It doesn't necessarily have to be a different company, I guess, as long as they offer those services. But I mean, being very clear about what you want. If it's, I can't get my message out on search, that's a very specific execution. If it's, I'm not quite sure, I'm trying to position my brand, it's sort of the early stages, or maybe you're further along and you know you've got to tighten it up because competition's coming in and you know it's just time to refine further or take your brand to the next level, then that's great for a brand strategist. But just being clear about, I always tell people, make yourself write a brief. Because it's more about, make yourself write a brief about what you are, what is the problem that you want to solve? Not that you're trying to solve it all, because that's the point of reaching out and having a partner. But the reason why I like that is it forces you to ask yourself what you're really trying to accomplish. And it's really about money at the end of the day, money and time and energy. And I'm a big person on, you're only human. There's only 24 hours in a day. There's only 7 days in a week. And the more efficient you can become on your own, just to like hone it into the zone, the more likely the output is on target for what you want in a shorter time for less money.
I love it. That is so key. And I think important, like I can't hear that enough too. And the importance of time and money and our energy and how finite all this is and efficiency. And I love that too, it's so tempting, as you said, to like, I think word vomit all of that, the problem, and then try to solve it for yourself. It's like, that's why you're coming to the table, reaching out. And so I think that's like an exhale. It's like, oh, and I don't have to solve it. So great. I was just looking at the time. We've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to we've got a couple other like last minute questions we can ask, but I wanted to give this audience an opportunity to come off mute and ask questions if you have them. As you've seen, we've got 3 incredible marketing strategists available. If you guys have any questions that you wanted to ask them, thoughts we touched on or haven't yet. Debbie, you look like oh, there we go. There's Debbie. Yes. Let's see. Yes.
Eriko, I love that you said you're still playing with your Play-Doh and you don't have a website up, and because I'm in the same place right now, and I actually help people get their websites up, but I'm not there with my own. I am pivoting from 20 years of freelance writing and generalist working with different clients. And I'm really niching down and focusing on like coaches, consultants, solopreneurs, and I am recently certified through StoryBrand, and that, Eriko, actually, and Ashley and Molly too, is really focusing in on what we call a brand script, and your one-liner, and getting very clear on who you are, what you do, who you serve, who you're, very, very much targeting that customer, what's their problem. Not all about you and your great background and everything else, but what that target client's problem is, how you can help them and how they get it, and how easy it is to find you and work with you. But my question for you all is, I've always just been Debbie Girardi, or Girardi writer, and I'm playing with, at this point, and I want to stay a solopreneur. With the StoryBrand community, I have hundreds of associates all over the world that I can tap into for areas of expertise that I don't want to focus on. As you said, there's only so many hours in a day and days in a week, but I want to stay a solopreneur. Do I keep my own name or do I name myself?
That's a great question. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can just share my own personal experience because I'm in the same boat, Debbie. So I would say you are your brand right now. So you are the 20 years of experience. So when I connect with you, I know I'm going to get this fantastic set of experiences that are going to translate into the deliverables I'm looking for. So I use Eriko Pope a lot. Now the butt of that is, but what I find is sometimes that's limiting, because what I don't want to do is just talk about myself all the time. Like, well, you want to talk about the services that you provide in a more less personal way sometimes. So for me, it's an and. I've also created a brand for my company called Katalyst STL. And the focus of the brand is the change I want to see. So it allows me to change this. It's a little different narrative versus just Eriko and my years of experience. It's almost like the functional reason to believe that if you partner with me, we're going to end up in a good space. But the Katalyst STLs allows me to show a vision of where I want to go. And so the brands serve different roles. I don't know if that helps you, but that's sort of in my mind how for me, it was an and. I needed both, and cultivating both in different ways.
I think that's super helpful because it's like you've got this great, as you said, like this commodity of your experience and the people who know you, and if they hear your name and they know what that means, that is a brand in and of itself. But then there's the whole world of people who don't know you, and so it's like, is it almost like you can pick and choose, or do you use like, is one like first or second, or you kind of pick and choose depending on what the audience is and what the goal or the opportunity may be?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for instance, it just depends on what I'm choosing to do. So Katalyst STL leads in with my nonprofit clients, for instance. But when I'm doing something like this, or I'm teaching at WashU and I'm doing a faculty, masterclass or something, then I do take it to me, because that's sort of how that industry works. It's the professors that teach, not companies, are coming in and teaching. So it just depends. It gives me flexibility. So Debbie, I could imagine in your space, it's very similar. Sometimes you might want to show up as Debbie as the primary brand, if you will. And other times where, for me, in my case, Katalyst STL leads the conversation.
No, I love that. That's a really great point, because while I want to be a solopreneur, I do want to also act as a micro agency, because I can actually hand select these experts within the community that can focus on areas where I don't have the expertise or the desire to. I like that.
And that's great for networking, because your network wants to work with, like my network wants to work with Katalyst STL. It's a broader entity than just saying, hey, I work with Eriko, which isn't bad, I hope, but it's a little bit different narrative.
Love that. Thank you so much.
I think that's a really great idea. Molly gave some feedback in chat as well. She said, I also think you can seamlessly leverage your network to bring in resources as needed if you go beyond your name. So mine is, Molly's is ML strategy. So close in, but also allows for more than just her on a project as needed, which I think is what Eriko was saying. So I think that's awesome. And I love it. Anytime you can have flexibility within it. And again, it goes back to the foundation that we all talked about as well. Like, who are you? But you can play with our Play-Doh. I love, that's going to be the word of this panel, my takeaway, Play-Doh. And hopefully that's a helpful analogy for all of you guys. We are right at 10:30. So I like to be cognizant of everybody's time. But if anyone had last question, last thoughts, any of our panelists that you want to leave anybody with? Ashley, I know we haven't heard from you in a minute. I don't know if you had any last thoughts that you wanted to leave everybody with.
I just wanted to say that you can also just have fun with it and try a brand out. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. I have an LLC that I sign NDAs with, and it's just called Some Startup in Colorado. And it's just, tongue in cheek, and it's fun. It's literally, if you look at my LinkedIn, it's called Some Startup in Colorado.
My favorite.
And so, there are no big mistakes as long as you lead with authenticity, grace, and offer that same grace to other people, and just lead with kindness. And like Kate said about like being service oriented, like making sure that, and I think all of the panelists have brought up problem solution based, just do your best and know that you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay to continue to have that be an evolution.
Oh, and that's reassuring, actually, as a brand, is to know that we can't screw it up. I mean, luckily this isn't brain surgery, but it can feel like it, because it is so important. The implications are huge. And especially, I think, whether we work for a big company or it's our own, it's an extension of us. We invest so much of that invaluable time and energy and money and everything that goes into it. So we care very much, but it's also, I think, kind of an exhale feeling to know it is Play-Doh. We can't, we can have some flexibility. There's some moving around, and that there are great resources both within the RISE community and without, we can reach out for help and resources. So Thank you guys all so much to our 3 panelists. You were fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who logged on and joined us today.
Thank you.
Valuable. We're going to post the recording, links, and all the options. And our 3 panelists are available and love to collaborate, ask more questions. They're open for opportunities. So I'll put their contact information and make it available to you as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your beautiful day, and I'll look forward to seeing everyone hopefully next week for our next session, and hopefully, even more hopefully, in person at Rise Denver or St. Louis soon. Be well, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.